He describes himself as the morning star. A lot of the imagery associated with Christ in the New Testament has to do with light. You know, I'm the light of the world. At the Transfiguration, he was brighter than, his garments were brighter than launderers and could make them, and his face was shining like the sun. So a lot of the imagery associated with Christ in the New Testament has to do with light. And he's described there in Revelation 22 as the morning star. So here in Revelation 2, for those who are faithful in Thyatira, I'll give to you the morning star. So it may well be, I will give myself to you. And I will be with you. And you will bear my name, you will be my people. And that's contrasted with the threat that comes against Jezebel. I'll cast her upon a bed of sickness. And she will suffer great punishments. But you people, I will give myself. All right. Very good. Now, we're going to go straight on to Sardis. Sardis in chapter 3. So, let me just read the first 6 verses for the sake of the DVD. To the angel of the church in Sardis write, these are the words of him who holds the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your deeds, and you have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. For I have not found your deeds complete in the sight of my God. Remember therefore what you have received and heard, obey it and repent. But if you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what time I will come to you. Yet you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. He who overcomes will, like them, be dressed in white. I'll never blot out his name from the book of life, but I will acknowledge his name before my Father and his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay, Sardis. A bit of background on Sardis. It was about 30 to 40 miles southeast of Thyatira. It was a glorious city, Sardis was, but much of its splendour lay in its history in the past. So it was quite an ancient city. It was founded approximately 1200 BC, and it became capital of the powerful and wealthy Lydian kingdom, and it attained a lot of wealth through commerce and trade. So it was another of these trading cities. And it's one of the things that it's famous for. And interestingly enough, it was one of the first cities to mint gold and silver coins. So there you go. It had quite a commercial background. It was situated in an easily defended highland region. And from the beginning, because of its geography, it was regarded as an almost impregnable military stronghold. Because if you wanted to take over Sardis, you would first have to deal with the terrain. And you'd first have to scale this very demanding mountain before you could even begin to do any damage to the city. But it fell to the Persians in 546 BC, and the interesting thing is, there's quite a story about this. One of his troops scaled the so-called unscalable cliff, and at an unobserved point opened the gates of the city. So it's a bit like, the Trojan horse going into the city. Only this was done by a very brave soldier who scaled the cliff and opened the gates, and then Sardis fell to the Persians after a 14-day siege. So this astonished the ancient world, and from that point on, capturing Sardis became a saying for achieving the impossible. If you could capture Sardis, you could do the impossible. So it had that sort of character associated with its past. And the same thing occurred again in 214 BC under the invasion of the Seleucid ruler Antiochus III. And those who went to the Daniel study, the Fielding Bible study, will recognise that name because he comes up in the book of Daniel. In AD 17, there was a terrible earthquake that devastated Sardis and Philadelphia, and Sardis was rebuilt after extensive aid from Emperor Augustus. And it had a large but unfinished temple to Artemis, the patron goddess of the city, and people had a special interest in death and immortality, and much of their religious life was taken up with the fertility cycle and trying to be reborn. That was brought out in their religion. And it had a large Jewish community that dated from the 5th or 4th century BC. So syncretism may have been a major problem. That is, where you accommodate various parts of various religions and you put them all together in a big melting pot. That's what syncretism is. Did anybody in their research of Sardis come up with any other points to add to that?
I thought it was important that they were not vigilant, they were not aware that they needed to be protected, like what had died, because they thought nobody would ever be able to get there.
Yep, exactly. So what Maria is saying is that they were not vigilant. They didn't worry. They didn't think they had anything to worry about in terms of their, security. They thought they were in this fortress. They thought that militarily they couldn't be overcome, and so they were not taking guard and they weren't vigilant. And as we go through this letter, we'll see that a lot of what Jesus says has to do directly with that sort of characteristic. And the church is like a little microcosm of the city at large.
So do we have to be aware as a church?
We certainly do have to be aware as a church and to be vigilant and not to sort of rest on our laurels and think everything's okay because, we're a largest congregation. Palmerston North now, and it's great. Those are the sorts of warnings that arise out of this letter. Notice that Jesus introduces himself as the one who holds the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. That goes back to the vision in chapter 1, and this will test your memory. What are the 7 candlesticks in chapter 1? 7 churches, yes. Candlesticks is an image of the churches, 7 churches, 7 candlesticks. Who are the stars that Jesus holds in his right hand? Yeah, the spiritual leaders, not necessarily ministers, but somebody who'd be an authority in the congregation and whose responsibility would be to read out the letter and sort of expound it. So Jesus is reminding these people that he holds the leadership of the church in his hand. So even if they think everything's okay and, we don't need to worry about anything, Jesus holds the leadership in his hand, and the church really belongs to him, not to their own leadership. And they had to understand who was in control. Interestingly enough, this is one place in the 7 letters where the normal formula for introducing good things, which is I know your deeds, actually introduces their key weakness, which is their complacency. So normally in these letters where Jesus says, I know your deeds, you are faithful, you've been persevering under opposition, I know what you've been doing. In this case it is, I know your deeds, you guys are in deep trouble. So there's little good that could be said about this church, which is a pretty sobering thing to think about, really.
But I think that we have to think about this, not only because we talked about syncretism before.
Yes.
And that was in the church. The world was captain and they were all doing the things what everybody else did.
Yes.
And I think they forgot really the law of God, what he commanded them to do.
Mm-hmm. So they brought false thinking and viewpoints into the church. Yeah. They were not worrying about the laws of God, and that's a very serious warning. Yes, I think that's right. And we'll come back to those sort of more general lessons as we go through. In your own words, we've perhaps covered this already to some degree, but in your own words, what's the problem of the congregation, and how does it relate to the city's history?
They were under the influence of pagan culture.
They were under the influence of pagan culture. And
Contaminated.
Yes, they were. And what did they think about their own security? They were okay. They were okay. And they didn't need to worry. So just like the sort of military history of this city, they thought they were okay, right? They thought everything was fine because they had this fortress. There's no way anybody would be able to take us down. And then lo and behold, by surprise, some amazing soldier climbs this cliff and opens the door, and they're done.